Whew. Hey y'all, welcome to this week's edition of my mental health vlog. I like to think that I follow a lot of my gut when I do these vlogs. I originally was going to talk about why I decided to do this, especially since it isn't easy. We are still not in a place where people even understand mental health well enough to feel 100% confident or comfortable talking about my life with mental health, and especially at my age. So I was going to talk about that, and then an opportunity to talk about something else popped into my lap that can touch upon a lot of what I was going to talk about anyway. And the reason for this is because I'm very active on social media, mostly Twitter. I just don't have it in me to have like Instagram or Facebook. I try not to be on my Facebook page at all because my mom is still currently trying to reach out to me, and she doesn't get the point of I've cut her off and I need my distance. So it's been an ordeal, to say the least. And having social media helps me stay social because, as somebody who's diagnosed as a sociopath, one of the things that I know about myself is that I can cut people off. That it doesn't hurt me as much as it would most people to have limited, if not no contact with other human beings. But in the same vein, there are times where I do like talking and interacting with people, especially online, where I feel a bit more control over the levels of who I interact with and what I want to have back and forth. Now, I've worked on myself with that because I know that I came from a place even 10 years ago on Twitter where I played all the social manipulation games. And I had to learn the hard way that you get what you give. So I like giving people a chance. Unless they're obviously trolling me or trolling people that I enjoy talking to, I try to give people with a difference of opinion chances. But what I don't think people understand is how you come across when you talk to people who are living through stuff. And especially with mental health, and especially with racism. And the reason why I bring this up in this vlog today is because a lot of that happened to me today. And I'm not trying to say this as putting intentions on people. I'm trying to explain to you, especially if you're a non-black person and non-POC in general, how you come across online when you're talking to people who have lived experience. And as somebody who has lived 44 years with mental health issues, somebody who loves history, who the only reason why I don't have a current degree in historical studies because it was discouraged by the people who shouldn't have discouraged any of my path. It just troubles me the way people talk to people of color online. And I don't think some of you realize how bigoted you come across when you do that. The problem is, you don't even realize or feel like you're being bigoted as you share articles with a person like me about personality tests. And with this blog, I want to explain this is not for you to attack anybody I've had a back and forth with. If you see me dialoguing, even if the person I'm dialoguing with says something that contradicts me, I don't need defenders. That's the problem I see with a lot of people who want to follow me, which I love y'all. If I didn't, I wouldn't put up with Twitter. I'm being 100% honest with this. I love you in a way that isn't like normal love before people go, oh, you're a sociopath. How do you love? I realize that when I say I love people, it's just I love what I can get out of this situation. I'm honest about that. But what I don't love is when people take a back and forth that's civil and turn it into a big war. And the problem with Twitter for the last few years is that every difference of opinion turns into a big war. Everybody takes sides and you gotta be right, you gotta be wrong. No. I want to get back to having civil discussions even if we're coming from a different area. And it's hard to do that on Twitter. Even making the thread I made about the situation, I was in my mind so worried that people were going to go after the original poster and then a subsequent poster in my thread that I was like, I should just take this down. And it shouldn't be. I should have to fucking referee my own threads. Now, if somebody is blatantly trolling, because we've all had that, people who use slurs, people who just want to get the goat, and you want to go at them before I block them, that's your business. But I'm tired of people seeing difference of opinions and different perspectives as a way to draw battle lines. It makes me anxious, and it makes me a lot less likely, now that my home life is getting a lot better and I could be spending time with Axiom instead, than being on social media where everybody's fighting. Y'all need to chill with that, because it's really annoying. But to get back to the point, yesterday, being just online, a friend of mine who's also an introvert did a personality test. I personally like certain personality tests. I know they've been debunked. I've seen the Adams ruins everything. I went and I did research after watching that TV show, because it's one of my favorite true TV shows. And yeah, you find out that the history of the Myers-Briggs personality test isn't good. But if you studied actual history, which a lot of you don't, because you think knowing history equals shame, that a lot of the stuff that we have today has sullied history. And the problem with Myers-Briggs is it's not peer tested or reviewed, and that's because a lot of people just want to debunk it as pseudoscience. Now, I understand how dangerous pseudoscience can be. We live in a time where people don't want to get life-saving vaccinations because they think it affects their mental health and other disproven notions. So we are in perilous times where pseudoscience can be very dangerous. But I had to stop and think about something that was tweeted at me about the personality things that didn't sit right with me. Because unlike the personality test, which I took with a grain of salt, especially after finding out about Myers-Briggs and the whole eugenics lean and the whole racism lean that the trait system originally started from, and wonder if the person who was telling me about that, and what I felt was a condescending way, but I didn't want to make a big thing about it, understood that A, I knew the origins, which a lot of people, when they give articles and stuff like that to people of color, y'all come across as you're telling us that we don't understand the history of things. You need to stop. Or you need to learn how to word your tweets. Because I understand for some of you, especially if you're in that field of psychology, that you think pseudosciences are bad for your profession. But what I'm telling you is that I was treated more humanely by words on a screen than your profession. And the problem I feel is that people act like stuff that's rooted in a negative always has to be a negative. Yes, the original trait people who came up with the concept were garbage. I don't lie about that. I even made in my original tweet where I found a personality test that I feel was more in depth. It felt like they did actual research before they put this out. It was fun to read. I'm going to continue to go to the site because I enjoyed the analysis that I got. And I know confirmation bias is a thing too, before people start in on that. But I felt a lot more at ease reading this breakdown of what they felt was my personality. I answered the questions 100% as honestly as I can, including being neutral about stuff that I didn't quite understand what they were trying to get, because I overanalyzed a lot of stuff. It felt like they took my answers and gave me a breakdown that didn't just pigeonhole me into one type, but explained a lot of stuff that I know I personally do, that I know I personally feel when interacting with people, and doesn't negate the stuff that I go through mental health-wise, which not a lot of personality tests do, which is why I was able to believe a lot of the stuff that I've seen on shows like Adams Ruins Everything, and a lot of stuff I researched myself about the original Myers-Briggs trait test. I understand that it came from a place of negativity. What I tried to explain to both the posters is because enough people believed in the traits thing, because it has grains of truth in it, there are people who are trying to make this an actual study. They're met with a wall of people who call it stuff like astrology, and I'm sorry. As somebody who believes in spirituality that isn't organized religion, it kind of bothers me that people are like, oh, astrology is just garbage too. I get that it doesn't float your boat. And I'm not heavy on astrology as some people are. I don't base everything I do on it, but I do like calling myself a Gemini. I feel like there are a lot of people who think their intellect means pooing on stuff that they think is beneath them, and you don't look any better doing that. The whole thing of dismissing people's beliefs that keep us sane, keep our minds straight when they're anything but, bothers me. And I don't say this to start a fight with y'all. That's the problem. It's hard for me to convey how I'm feeling in 240 characters because it's not easy to take what people are saying, even when you're conscious of what you type out. I am so in my head that I worry at the stuff that I tweet out to people just in response because I don't want them taking it as confrontational. But I know there's no way of knowing if they're going to take it as such. I just want people to understand that if you're basing your hate of personality tests off just the Myers-Briggs revelation that, yeah, they were racist, they believed in eugenics, which as somebody with mental health, I'm not down with anybody who believes in eugenics. And for those of you who don't understand what eugenics is, it is a belief that there are genetic superior people and genetic inferior people, and that genetic inferior people shouldn't breed, actually lower the population's quality. And these genetic superior people always happen to be straight white people. Or for some non-black POC, straight fair skin of their kind. They always allude towards white supremacy. That's the problem with eugenics. And if you look at the original Myers-Briggs personality test, yeah, you're going to see a lot of the issues with those tests. But what I feel is that a lot of people who felt strongly about, yes, there are things about this test that I definitely don't like, but there are things that I could take, do my own research, actually talk to people with certain traits and build profiles. Stuff like that happens. We have seen throughout history stuff that was originally done for negative reasons, including psychology, that have grown into actual helpful studies. And what bothers me when psychologists, people, especially people who are in psychology, who try to debunk things like personality tests, come across as smug when I said in my thread, and I mean this, your field has a lot of issues with bias. A lot. As a woman, especially, historically speaking, the shit y'all did to women, especially trans women, was horrific. Telling women that our moods, especially bipolar disorder, was just hypermania, and that things like stimulating our sexuality could help us with our mental illness, having more babies, praying it away. Stuff that has been both scientifically and psychologically debunked, but used to be the standard. You know how I know that psychology has been good towards people of color and women? I've lived it. I had a doctor look me in the face while evaluating my mental health and tell me that I was too smart to have schizophrenia. And that put me in a tailspin because I already had people around me saying that Black people can't have mental illness. It's just a diagnosis of the racism and you'll get rid of it. They did not want me talking about having mental health problems because of the stigma and the shame they felt from me having it. They didn't care that I was suffering, that the non-lucid days put my life in danger. They didn't want the shame of me admitting my problems. And it sent me in a tailspin of trying to figure out what the fuck is wrong with me, because if it's not schizoaffective disorder, which is schizophrenia and bipolar, why do I hear voices? Why do I have days where things around me are happening, but they didn't really happen? It pisses me off that people don't understand that mental health is not cut and dry. And the problem with psychology throughout history was it was started and founded by straight old white men. And I say straight with quotations because a lot of them weren't as straight as they thought they were. It didn't take into consideration gender. It didn't take into consideration gender identity. It didn't take into consideration sexual orientation. In fact, when I went to school to study medical coding and administration, I still have an ICD-9 book that I learned from. And it was almost, I think, 20 years ago. That has mental illness listings, and being homosexual is on that list. Some of you have been alive in a time when none of this was affecting you. You don't know what it's like to not be able to be who you are out and proud. And I know this is coming out on the last day of Pride, so I think it really applies. Some of you are in your 20s and don't even realize that even as you were born, there were medical coding books that said who you loved made you mentally ill. And when I was your age and younger, being out was a death sentence. People thought they had the right to beat you to death for being who you are. So let me put it to you in plain terms. Psychology cannot have a pious leg to stand on when looking down on these personality tests, as far as I'm concerned. Because you still treat mental health as if you can just give us a label and treat us with a common brush, with our medicines, with therapy, with how we handle things. It's getting a lot better, and I will agree with the lady who said that. But even she had to give the caveat that it took 30 years and we're still not updated because society has changed a lot. And mental health is not something you can broad brush. I should not have survived as long as I have with what I have. I very nearly didn't. I am honest about that. There have been many days I have wondered, why am I still here? There are many days I don't want to be here still. I work with that. And there's an issue with mental health to where when you find stuff that works, whether the medicine's helping you sleep, whether talking it out helps you feel a bit better, that you start thinking, okay, I am doing better. I must not be as bad as people are saying. And then I stop doing the things that are helpful and the symptoms come back even worse. And then I have to do double the work to get back to where I was before I started to stop doing the things that were helping my mental health issues. So if you know this cycle, everything I just said is going to sound familiar to you because it's a fucked up hell that we're in. We get to a point where the therapy and the meds and the sleeping is working, and then in our minds, we're good. We don't have to keep that up. We're good. We've got this. And then it slowly starts to seep back. And you have to deal with the non-lucid. And that is the thing that scares me more than anything. Because the voices in my head are fine. I know some people, and that's a big problem that I'm definitely going to touch upon in one of the blogs, like to use voices as an excuse. A lot of people like to fake mental illness and say, oh, the voices made me kill people. And being diagnosed as a sociopath, I am so leery of that because a lot of people who commit murders, a lot of people who are just harmful and hateful, love to lean on, oh, I'm mentally ill, I'm a sociopath. And I try to be 100% honest when talking about stuff like this. I know I can emotionally detach. Matter of fact, I feel like it's a light switch for me now that I'm older. I can really just shut it off and just not feel stuff. I go to my go away place that I've had for a very long time due to different traumas. I also know that if I had to harm somebody to protect myself or somebody I love, I'm probably not going to hesitate like some people. What I also know, because I take the time to talk it out, to get help, is that I am still responsible for my actions. And if I hurt somebody, I don't have right to make them feel guilty because of my mental health. I still hurt them. And that's the thing, a lot of people with alleged mental health issues try to skirt around because you think it's a get out of responsibility free card. And it's not. And it's not fair to those of us who suffered in silence for far too long for you to get on places like this YouTube and stuff and say things like, well, I'm just out of pocket. That's just my personality. I have mental health issues. Let me cry on cue and people will believe me and want to protect me. And that's another thing I see people doing that kind of vexes me. I get that you want to have our backs, as I said earlier. It's one of the things that I do love about people who follow me is that I do feel protected sometimes, but I don't need your protection. I am not a child. I am 44 years old. And it bothers me that people infantile people with mental health issues. And you don't feel like you're doing it on purpose. And some of you probably aren't. But unless I am in a place where you know she is not all there, she's not lucid, 10 is checked out, I don't need you hand holding me. I don't need you explaining my life to me. And I don't need you treating me like a 5-year-old. Because unlike that horrible psychologist who sent me in a fucking deep depression and tailspin with his nonsense did, I know that what I have doesn't require a lack of intelligence. Just because you can't tell where you are sometimes or what day it is, just because your mind sees things that might not be there to somebody else, but is visibly, audibly, and physically there for you, doesn't mean you can't add 2 plus 2, man. The test he gave me was basic. But I guess in his world, a black woman, especially since we're supposed to be lower class, and because, I don't have a lot of money, I'm supposed to have lesser education than most, but that's not my backstory either. He thought he could tell me that my mental health issue wasn't real because I showed too much intelligence. And this is a problem with the psychology field that a lot of people don't talk about because, as a black woman, I hate rocking the boat. I hate drawing attention to myself because everybody's like, you're always making it about race. It's always about that. Why can't you talk? Because it's my life. I don't want to have everything linked to racism. But you know what makes it hard to do that? The racism that affects my life. And you don't want me talking about it because it hurts your feelings. But I live with this shit. I've had people downplay my very serious mental health issues due to their bias, due to their gender bias, and due to their racism. And it's because of that I have trust issues. I would love to have a psychologist that really wants to study the effects of schizoaffective disorder on black women. Study me. I would love to talk to them, get them in so that I can give them an unmasked look at how I am. But it's hard for me to trust now. Going through therapy, especially when I lived in the South, was a nightmare. Every other month, it felt like I had to get a new one because the turnover for free places is ridiculous. Even the place that I have here, I know because of the pandemic, I couldn't go to physical sessions. So when I am able to go back to physical sessions, I have to start with a whole new doctor, get them all adjusted to my ways, get used to what they think will work for me. And it's a freaking nightmare. When you're broke and you have mental health issues, it is hard to find stability, which is what you need to stay getting help. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that because a lot of people still think we choose this illness. And because mental health is not visible unless you're having an issue or non-lucid, people don't want to try to understand. People think, it can just go away. They see how I'm talking right now and they think, well, it can't be that bad. It's hell. It's the only way I can put it. Because I know there are days where I just don't feel right. And I'm lucky that I have people close to me right now that care and that help me through it. But not everybody has this. And too many of you come from this weird perch of, I know what I know because I studied and I have peer reviews. But your peer reviews come from a place historically that has been biased against people with ethnic differences, people with gender differences, people with sexual identity differences. And if you're not willing to acknowledge that, but shit on stuff like personality tests, which you can take those with a grain of salt. I admit that because of its origins and because of so many online scammy type tests, that people who take those tests should not only use those to explain themselves. But if you feel like I felt reading it, a sense of, yes, somebody sees me, I feel humanized by this, don't let some expert talk you out of that feeling. Because too many times, experts are way too clinical and far less human towards us. And if you're a psychologist or a psychology major and you're seeing this and you want to use this as an example, I'm telling you right now, I cut my empathy on and off. I don't know how I do it. Sometimes it just happens. If you think you have empathy, you need to understand that your field means you have to be open to different people's experiences. And you have to stop invalidating people based on what you learned in a textbook. If anything, the study of psychology should tell you that you need to be prepared for anything, because no one story is going to be alike. And that people take trauma and compartmentalize it, and it comes out in different ways. And if you're really going to go into the mental health field, you need to be prepared for that. And you need to be mindful that different backgrounds, especially people who are older, who have gone through some horrific things just for existing as who we are. We don't need your clinicalism. We need you to view us as humans. So that's what I just wanted to talk about today. And I hope I didn't come across as too preachy or emotional or deadpan, because I know sometimes I feel like I'm more emotional in my head and it doesn't always come across. I don't know. I just know I've survived 44 years with schizophrenia and then got a bipolar disorder diagnosed on top of that. I have survived dark days. I have survived manic highs that make me feel like I can do any and everything at once, and then the crash when that doesn't pan out. I love creativity. I love writing. I love story telling for just sci-fi and stuff. I love being me, but I don't always understand who I am. And because of my lack of funds, I tend to research and study as much as I can. And in researching and study, I know when stuff is bullshit and when it's not. And I know that I can't take anything at 100%. But what I do know is that we need to be a bit gentler in the way we interact, even on social media. I know that I can take stuff at a wrong value when I initially read it. That's why I didn't want my response to people to blow up. It was my biggest fear about the back and forth on that. Because I know there are always going to be people who think they know better than people who have the lived experience. But I need folks to understand that I'm okay with us having a difference of opinion. I just think they don't understand, especially when they're white, how they come across to people of color, and especially black people, with their friendly advice or with their articles to tell me about racist origins when, yeah, I already knew. So I'm about to wrap this up because I need to get ready to go mod. And I just want to thank everybody who tunes into these, who allow me to share the side of myself that I used to think was shameful. I used to live and suffer in silence because I live in a society that treats mental health as something that everybody thinks they know, but you don't really understand it. And it comes across when people like me open up and talk about who we are, and you treat us like, well, let me tell you about your life. Don't do that. But I'll be back next week with another one. Maybe a more in-depth talk about some of the things that I've seen people do. I don't know. I just know that I had one idea in my head, and then that talk about personality tests made me go, no, I really need to talk about how psychology has its own history of biases and stigmas. And that while, yeah, you have your peer review, I need you to look at your peers. Because a lot of your stuff still come from a place of white supremacy and especially patriarchal fuckery. And if you're using that to shun personality and trait studies, maybe don't. But I'm going to wrap this up. I will talk to you next week. Thank you for tuning in.